I just started recording, Johan, so up to you.
Very good, thank you. Got it sorted. Oh my word, system is not with me today. You know, there's saying thing that says it's being recorded. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to keep it on my screen, but yeah, maybe get going. Yeah, Patrick and colleagues, thank you for inviting me to speak at this forum. Also for the delegates and those who attend, a number of South Africans, a number of people that I know on a Friday evening. Thanks for joining us. It's a real privilege. So as you see on the screen there, the topic is AI in the rural streets of Africa. And there is an old colonial map on the screen at the moment, and I'm going to touch on that just now. But where this topic comes from is actually one of maybe the very first article I wrote for Business Day newspaper here in South Africa, which was about July or so of last year. And I've been writing for them. I think I just submitted today my 58th weekly article. So it's been a lot of writing for them, and it's a wonderful platform, and for some other publications as well. But it was actually entitled AI in the Dusty Streets of Rural South Africa. And it was based on an event I attended before all the lockdowns happened. And it was called Teens in AI. It was an event that was run from London, but in 8 or 9 cities across the world. And me and one of the teachers at one of the high schools here in Johannesburg arranged the local event. And it's called Red Hill School in Morningside, which is quite a well-to-do and wealthy school in quite a wealthy area. But we had a number of teenagers from the school, and then we had a number of teenagers from poor rural areas. And there's an organization in South Africa doing amazing work called the Tomorrow Trust. And they work with vulnerable and orphan children. And they have feeding schemes, but they also do a lot of education, and they also do a lot of digital upskilling. And they've got wonderful success stories about some of these children who had no future. And through this program, they taught them basic life skills, and also they were able to learn coding and robotics and the like. And those kind of stories really resonate with me. So on this day, we had half of the teenagers were from the school, half of the teenagers were from poor and rural areas. We mixed these groups up, and we had about 9 or 10 different tables. I was a mentor of one of the groups, one of the tables. The opening talk was done by one of my friends, a lady called Emily Mbele, who is one of the divisional CIOs of Rand Merchant Bank, part of the First Rand Group, one of the big banking groups in Africa. And her own story was one from a very poor rural background to eventually becoming quite a senior person in an investment bank. And how I got involved is they actually asked me to do the keynote opening. And I said, firstly, I'm a guy, I'm white. And these mostly Black girls and boys will not resonate with my story. And I'm glad we got a lady that they could resonate with, a lady of color who's done amazing things in the community as well. But what really led me to that article and to talks like this is at the table that I was the kind of the mentor, the moderator of. About 4 of the teenagers were from the Tomorrow Trust, and the other 4 were from this wealthy school. And it was mostly girls from the rural areas in my group. They were so informed about AI and digital technology. And I remember a lot of these kids study with candlelight. There's rarely electricity, rarely food even. And I've done over the years a lot of community kind of work in some of these areas, stayed in these areas for extended periods of time. And, it's difficult sometimes to understand what these people go through unless you are really embedded in those societies. And what I'm describing now is obviously something that's happening worldwide. Most likely, most people on Earth are living in some sort of rural existence, fairly poor existence as well. But so these girls were firstly very tuned up with this kind of technology. We then had to use one of the United Nations Sustainable Goals to create a conceptual mobile app. So we were whiteboarding it and planning it. And what this group decided was to create an app for sexual education for young people. And that was quite interesting, and especially from the girls' point of view, because they spoke a lot about gender-based violence, for instance, which is a big problem in our world, and particularly here in South Africa and in Africa. They spoke a lot about teenage pregnancies or forced teenage pregnancies. Some of them told stories about how they or some of their friends had to sleep with wealthier men in order to necessarily to prostitute themselves to feed their families. And I was so shocked really at the reality that these young people were living in. And we kind of come to these events with our, and I'm speaking on my own behalf, from this ivory tower of corporate background, AI and all these great technologies and stuff like that. And I realized on that day in particular that unless the work that I'm doing, and I can't speak on behalf of everyone because we all have our own lens, we all have our own way of doing good. You know, we can't all be a Mother Teresa or a Gandhi or something like that. But unless in my own small way, I can do something to network with other people and use this smart technology era that's really a gift to impact people on that level, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, when it comes to protecting their digital future, when it comes to helping them secure a job to feed their families. Unless I can do that, then what the hell am I doing? Then I'm just sitting on my little ivory tower behind my, you know, they often call the podium or the pulpit the coward's castle, because you can stand behind the podium and say pretty much what you want, and a lot of people will have to listen to you. But that was my experience that day, which was kind of like a eureka moment. And then I started speaking to a lot of people locally here in South Africa and in Africa who work in kind of AI or new technologies. A lot of them in academia, and the country we've got on here tonight who works at Stellenbosch doing amazing work. We've got people who work in like societal goods, like feeding schemes. I've worked with some people who use this technology in healthcare, which I will touch on. And one of the things I realized is that there are so many people doing good work here in South Africa and in Africa using smart technology, but very few of them know about each other, let alone actually work together. And a lot of them are essentially reinventing the wheel some way or another. And something I've really been trying to do over the last 2 or 3 years is to introduce and connect people with each other. So for instance, I know a friend of mine who's a doctor doing prostate cancer research using image recognition and computer vision and the like, to one of my other friends who is a breast cancer researcher using the same kind of technology for those ailments. And a lot of what they do is very similar. So let's connect them for the work they're doing within these communities. A lot of people managing.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, Johanna, I just have a short story to tell.
Please do.
Sorry to interrupt you, but when you gave me the title for the event, right? You said that would be AI in the dusty streets of rural Africa, right? That was the first title, right, of the presentation. And funnily enough, I went to the community page, right, to enter the event, right, and I entered AI in the dusty streets of rural. Then I couldn't save it, right, because it was against the the rules, right? It was not politically correct, I guess, right? So I don't know if there was some AI right behind the scene, but I had to figure out what would be an acceptable title, right? By the way, so just to the topic of AI and free speech, because that's quite a hot topic these days, right? Thanks to one of your originally compatriots, but anyway, different topic. But yeah.
Patrick, yeah, that's interesting. We can almost call it AI for societal good or something like that. But it's interesting that title was blocked or flagged.
Yes.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. It was flagged as inappropriate or something. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Wow. Very interesting. Okay. So So well, let me get going, and then I realize the clock is ticking, and I'd love to maybe have some questions all for us as a smallish community here tonight to share ideas around this. But what I was saying is, unless in the work that I'm doing, I can try in some way to use this technology and the people who work in the field to do good for the people in the country I love and for my own son's future. He's 8 years old. And for that matter, for people in Africa and other areas. Then what the heck am I doing? And that's really what got me on this topic and writing about this. So I quickly want to just talk a little bit about the size and the relevance of Africa and some things a lot of people might not realize. Now, on this slide, this is typically a kind of first slide you will see, well, that I see when I either speak or attend a lot of these conferences. It's very Western based, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it only tells one part of the story. But you'll see it's great images of New York or London or whatever. And we'll talk about artificial intelligence, but it's often from a very Western perspective. And I'll give a story soon, or tell a story about a panel discussion where I was on, where this really came out. But why can't the pictures look like this when we speak about artificial intelligence, showing the third world or the developing world or these so-called rural
This is
streets
brilliant.
in Africa? You know?
This is brilliant, Johan, because this is really brilliant. I like it so much because, okay, we need to remove the bias wherever we see it, right? And this is really brilliant. I love it. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, Patrick. Thank you. So yeah, I'm just thinking for me, myself as a speaker, because you kind of do what you see, and you know, you learn what you see, and we use all these almost like American slide decks often, and I want to use more decks like this because AI is as relevant, if in a way not more relevant, in this setting that you see on the screen here now, than in high-flying New York City or London or something like that. That is, if the technology is used like it can be used to really do good. And I'm going to touch on some of those practical ways of how I believe we can do good and that people are doing good. Here is the world map as we typically know it, and you know, as you see there on the screen, the Mercador project from 1569. So obviously, at that stage, when they looked at how the continents and the different countries almost scaled, that this is the world map now for most of us. When we Google it, or even when we grew up and we went to school, we would see a picture on the wall, and it would be this kind of a picture. But Africa is relatively small compared to the rest of the world. And then when you look at the actual size of Africa compared to the rest of the world, it is this picture. Okay, so I'm just going to go back one and look at this one. And now look at, and again, this is now a globe that we're trying to make straight. So it's even still a little bit skewed, but Africa is a huge continent. I mean, it's the fastest growing continent from a population point of view in the world. And obviously I'm a bit biased because I am an African. I grew up here. Yes, I'm a bit bleak for a lot of people to say, well, you call yourself African, but this is the only home I have. You know, I don't have an ancestral visa. I can't immigrate to America or to Europe. I lived in Europe and I loved it, but I don't want to go. I want to live here. This is my country. This is where I want to raise my son, hopefully my grandchildren one day. And I'm very passionate about my own country, but also about Africa. And let me show you one last slide before I get into the topic. But look at, from a scale point of view, how India and parts of Europe and continental United States, etc., fit into the size of the continent of Africa. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I first saw this, I thought this was fake. But it's not, luckily. But because I didn't think Africa was bigger than the US, for instance. And I mean, US fits there into the top northern part of Africa, almost like where the Sahara is. But it's a massive, massive continent comparative to a lot of other countries in the world. You know, I don't know, Patrick, have you ever seen this picture? Do you even believe it? You know?
No, okay, okay, Switzerland is a dot, right? It's okay. But yeah, that's impressive. Never seen it.
Yeah. It's how big the continent is, you know. So again, it's remember that first picture of kind of New York AI, and then the second picture of the rural area with AI. And then this, before I get to the next slide, just want to tell this one story that amplified it for me. I was on a panel discussion about the so-called digital divide and how do we upskill young people and how do we use this technology in education, especially in rural areas, which is a huge passion of mine, and I'll touch on it tonight. But there was particularly, we were four on the panel, and one of the people, and I don't think he meant it in a bad way, but we all have our biases, you know, and we all have our lack of exposure regarding certain topics. And there are obviously some people who really mean it badly, or they're narcissistic about it or whatever. I think most of us mean it well, but we don't always really know what we're speaking about. And what this person said is, given the fact that we've got smartphones, that's smarter devices than we ever could have imagined 5 or 10 years ago, given that we've got 5G or even 4G in most areas in the world, people don't have an excuse not to upskill themselves. That was essentially his statement. And I paused it and I said, but because we were speaking particularly about rural South Africa, and this was a South African. And I said to him, but just a moment, have you been to these rural areas? And I'm not talking on a tour through Soweto, because we typically go to Nelson Mandela's old house, you know, when he was arrested, and where Desmond Tutu lived on that same street. And we go to the Apartheid Museum, wonderful areas, wonderful restaurants. But that's not the real picture of Soweto. You know, it's when you go deep into that township and you see how people live. And for that matter, and I spent about 2 years working in most of the townships surrounding Johannesburg and Pretoria, the two biggest cities in South Africa. And what I said to him is, remember, firstly, most people don't have electricity or constant electricity. Most people don't have good connectivity. Most people certainly do not have smartphones or even their own phone. It's a family sharing a phone that's 10 years old. There's 6 or 7 or 10 people living in a building or a shack that by candlelight. And I said, just before we make these statements of just upskill yourself, smartphones, 4G, 5G, we view it through our own lenses and through the lives we live, which is very natural. But I think one of the things I'd like to come out of this conversation tonight is when it comes to AI and this great technology as it applies to continents like Africa and other areas of the world, it is very difficult for us who live a somewhat of a Western life, who earn somewhat good money, who are not worried about, you know, really are more at the top of the Maslow triangle. You know, we don't daily scrounge for food and try and keep our kids safe. We've got, as Maslow said, we've got that luxury really at the top of that triangle to think about philosophy and to talk about this kind of technology in an armchair, nice kind of a way. Nothing wrong with that, as long as we realize that our view is very limited when it comes to most people on Earth. And it's easy for all of us, and I point the finger to me, myself first, to make statements about upskilling and healthcare and this technology will make life for everyone better until you see the abject poverty and the lostness that billions of people live in. So that's part of the reason for this conversation. So let me get to quick. Now only I get to my agenda, but I'm not going to waste too much time because I see the clock is ticking. So just some points I want to touch on. And again, I think looking at the audience and some of the people, I know a lot of this is preaching at the choir in a way, but I'll bring it all back then to the topic of AI in Africa. I want to start off just talking about this trajectory of smart technology and also what is smart technology. I want to bring an African lens on it, this continent of promise. I'm going to talk about autonomous technology and then the potential risk it can have for us. And then I want to bring it back to the conclusion. I can't really see my screen because it still says I'm being recorded by the host, but I think I did memorize some of the slides, luckily. So very briefly, is something I often wonder about is because I think we lack a strong philosophical and ethical view on this kind of technology. A lot of the books you read, a lot of the webinars you attend or even speak at is very technology and platform focused. And certainly that is important. But what will this technology do to humanity? And not from a pessimistic, dystopian point of view. I'm actually quite optimistic about this technology because it can do a lot of good, not just from a business point of view, but from a society point of view. But I don't think we should be blinded by, if it gets out of control, where this technology could go into the future if we think of privacy and implants and future of our children and the like. So if we do get brain implants, which might happen this year if Elon Musk gets his way through Neuralink, apart from the wonderful benefits medically, if we think of brain injuries, if we think of dementia and other ailments, I wonder if you know, and if you see the pictures here at the bottom, is you know, we started off sitting at our desks, laptops or desktops, to work on a computer or to connect with others. Then we started using handheld devices, our mobile phones. Then we started wearing our devices, our smartwatches and the like. And we're gonna get to this brain-computer interface technology as a reality. I mean, the technology is already there. It's a matter of approval and acceptance. And as I said, the potential benefits, like all of these things, it's this double-edged sword. The potential benefits are immense. Potential downside is incredibly immense. But how will it change what it means to be human? So, and that is a whole big philosophical conversation that we don't necessarily have time for. We can there talk about consciousness and what does it mean to have a soul, and how do we differ from other primate species from an evolutionary point of view, and what makes us so much better, and when it comes to walking upright and tool use with our hands and language in the sense of the future and sense of the past. So hugely philosophical conversation, which is more and more needed than just the technology. But I do wonder if parts of my body are 3D printed, and if part of my brain belongs or lives in the cloud in the future, will I still be Homo sapien? Will I still be human? I don't know. It's something worth thinking about. The metaverse, I think there's a lot of hype, but I think the hype will over time dissipate. I think we will get to a point where, and especially with brain implants, I think of this because the metaverse for now is still what you see here in the first 2 or 3 pictures. It's still a device I need to carry on my face, AV glasses. But what if the brain implants can actually give me the sensory experience through my eyes, but also, you know, imagine you're racing a car and you actually feel the wind and you feel the movement and you see what you need to see, but it's all through the implants. Yes, imagine what it can do for training doctors and others, but imagine what other downside it can have. So metaverse, I think for me, the things I read about, it's still much hype, but we're going to get there. I'm already dealing with banking customers that's looking at meta banking. And how can we move especially the corporate and investment banking customers into some sort of a metaverse? I've mentioned the brain-computer interface, and then this last point, and I hope you all read or have read or know about Yuval Noah Harari, who is a philosopher and a historian, who is also in my opinion, one of the most important voices about this technology. He wrote Sapiens, he wrote Homo Deus, he wrote 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And in Sapiens, he says that we might create, through this technology and through automation, automation, we might get to a point where only a small percentage of people on Earth who can afford this kind of technology and the longevity it brings. And here we can talk about things like the so-called post-human society and the like, but where the bulk of people on Earth will not be able to upskill themselves fast enough. And he says that we will call the useless class. And imagine the societal upheaval that could bring. Okay. Any comments there, or can I move on, or questions? We can make it interactive, you know. No, Patrick, anyone? Can I get going?
No, sure, go ahead. I don't know if there's a question. Anyway, if people have questions, they can just either put it in the chat or raise their hand in the chat, right? And then, yeah.
Very good, thank you. So just from an African lens point of view, I mean, there's 3 pictures here. The one is chatbots or conversational AI. The one is this use in medicine or the medical industry. The other one is using this technology in education. Starting at the left, on the African continent, there's an estimated 3,000 different languages or dialects. And understandably, most of the chatbot or conversational AI platforms that we use are Northern American or European. And the main languages are obviously French, Portuguese, English, and maybe a few others. But there's quite a few very interesting initiatives, especially among some of the universities here in South Africa, to really expand the underlying data for this kind of technology to be relevant to the bulk of the languages on the African continent. Now, think if you are living in Gabon, somewhere in a very rural area, and your child is busy dying from fever, and you could speak to a conversational AI and ask for advice. And yes, that conversational AI will not ever necessarily replace a doctor. But if you're not near a doctor, or you can't afford it, it's like Googling, but now you don't have time to Google, your child is busy dying. If you could speak to that conversational AI to give you health advice, to tell you what to do right now to help save your child, that would be incredible. If you can use that same technology to get training and education in how to use your finances, how to grow a small business, and the like, that would be incredible. But what if you can't speak the language or any of the main languages on the African continent? And what if you, so what I'm saying is that this technology, conversational AI, and the way it's growing could be of great benefit to people on this continent. But it is not at all touching even, I would say, 5% of the people. And it's not anyone's job, I think, but Africans and our academics and our AI practitioners, and there are luckily, as I said, a lot of initiatives in this, to make sure that more and more dialects and languages spoken in Africa is covered by this kind of technology. Second picture there is healthcare, and I often reference a friend of mine, Dr. Catherine Malherbe at the University of Pretoria, and she's one of many people doing incredible work, but I love telling her story. She is a breast cancer researcher and practitioner, but she's got a charity that works in rural areas to upskill women about the dangers of breast cancer. One of the things she told me is that across the world, the figures are that breast cancer will kill about 1 out of 8 women on average. But in South Africa, it is about 1 out of 4. And one of the reasons is lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. It's very stigmatized. People don't speak about it. So she actually and a team go into rural areas and train these women about it. But what they also do, because these areas don't have expensive medical equipment to do mammograms and the like, so they have developed a handheld device to do the breast scan. It's connected to your mobile phone, it's connected to the cloud, and within seconds, you get a almost 100% accurate and almost instantaneous diagnosis of what could be wrong, with recommendations. Some of her counterparts do the same for lung cancer. We know that image recognition can do these kind of things, but not only is she and her team using this technology for the actual diagnosis, they provide the holistic service around the treatment, around the education and the like. We need more of that across the world, but we definitely need more of that in Africa. And then education, which is such an important thing. And where the story I often like to tell is when the hard lockdown happened in South Africa, which was very much the same time, I guess, or just before most of the world, I was homeschooling my then 6-year-old son. And the school that he is at wasn't bad. They provided a lot of Dropbox links and little videos and stuff. But I experienced with him what I did in school, because for most of us, primary and even secondary school was one of the most boring things I could ever do. And I didn't do well because it didn't trigger my interest. It was a one-size-fits-all kind of education. It was memorizing facts. It's not learning of meaning and the like. So I still took my son through some of the mandatory stuff, but I actually found a few great games for his iPad where he could design buildings, learn engineering skills, learn very elementary coding skills, real critical thinking. And in my opinion, that was more important than the stuff the school sent in. But how can we use this technology to identify in learners and students how they learn best? Some people, we know, some people learn better through listening, auditory. Some people learn better through seeing pictures, mind mapping and the like. We are different kinds of people. Some people, and this is also a big problem in the world, but on our continent, a lot of children have eyesight or hearing problems, but they're not deaf or blind. And in fact, often it is so subtle that no one really picks it up. But because they can't really see what the teacher is writing on the blackboard or read what's in their books, they can't always hear what's being spoken in class. They constantly fall behind. I've got another friend who developed a mobile app that you can use in these areas to do elementary ear and eye tests And they've picked up that I think in the areas where they work, 25% of the children have problems in hearing and seeing. Subtle problems that no one ever would have picked up, but they would every year fall more and more behind. So we can use this technology in this example, but also in the way I think we deliver the content, that content that's more customized to individuals. I know in corporates, this is already happening. I've seen many examples where when it comes to training of staff members, customized to their particular individuality. We should do a lot of more of this in education. Got about 6 minutes left. 2 more slides, if I remember correctly. But what I call automation, I don't know if that word exists. So my job at PricewaterhouseCoopers is in intelligent or hyper automation, depending on whether you listen to Gartner or others, or for that matter, robotics process automation and the like. What do we do with the people that we no longer need because we automated what they do? And we know that this technology can already do better most of the especially repetitive, lower level administrative tasks that most people do. But what do we do with those people? Now, in South Africa, and this is most likely true for many areas in the world, every wage earner on average looks after 6 or 7 other extended family members. So when we say let's get rid of 50 people, it is a lot more than that. That's 700 people most likely. So, and I understand, I don't want to be naive about this. We've got KPIs, we've got shareholder pressure. We have to cut costs, but unless we also have an ethical view on this and a societal view, it will harm us. And I often tell my customers, especially when the conversation on automation starts with so-called FTE reduction, getting rid of people. Firstly, I tell them ethically, I won't work with you. And secondly, it's a stupid thing to do because don't you have future growth prospects? And the example I often use, if you have 100 people working for you and through automation and efficiencies, you can actually take only 80 people to do the work of the 100. We know that that is possible, but don't you plan to grow in the future? So let's turn this around. So rather than saying I take it from 100 to 80, so rather than employing 50 more people in the next 2 years, keep it to the 100 that you have. And then through efficiencies and automation, you let the 100 people that you have now, through upskilling and through empowerment, do the work that the 150 or 170 people would have done in a year or two. It's maybe a bit naive to think about it like this, but we have to consider it. It cannot just be about getting rid of people. Future of work, I mean, there's so much about that. Do we even right now in secondary or in tertiary education really train people for jobs that they're going to do in 4 or 6 years if we don't always know what those jobs are? We will always need accountants, we'll always need doctors, we'll always need nurses and the like. But I don't know, honestly, when my son, and as I said, he's only 8, he's got another 10, 11 years before he's at university age. I don't know if I'll ever send him to university. I just don't know if it's worth his while. I hope to be proven wrong. And I'm sure, and Country, if you're still on, maybe later, I'd love to hear your comments on that, on the work you're doing this. How do we keep our tertiary education's future relevant, you know? Lastly, on this slide, just, and I alluded to it earlier, business process outsourcing and the PESA, and we have Cape BPO doing a lot of work to get offshore work into South Africa. We are an primarily English-speaking country. We are very multicultural, so our ability to deal with different cultures and languages is better than a lot of other countries in the world. Our location, especially from a European point of view, is ideal. So we are currently seeing thousands of jobs, but not enough, coming to South Africa. And I often dream when I drive past some of these rural areas to see a world-class building housing 10,000 young people who are freshly out of high school, who've gone through some training to help them use their humor and their South Africanness and their tenacity, empowered by great systems and automation to give customers wonderful experience. That is really a dream of mine. And then just this last one, and I'm sure you all obviously know of or have read Orwell, my favorite author for many reasons. And yes, when he wrote 1984, in the year 1948, he was primarily commenting on the Soviet era and on the Soviet Union. He was a dying man at the time, and he was writing against the clock. And but you know, we know things like Big Brother and the Thought Police and Speak Right and the like from Orwell's work. He obviously also wrote Animal Farm, and all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. He, for instance, wrote that, and think of this now, in 1948, he said, what if the television I'm looking at is looking back at me? All our TVs are looking back at us, or most of them are smart devices that monitor us. We are always monitored, always listened to. And, and we can talk about Facebook and others here, but it's just, given the free reign of this technology, will it create a utopia, which it can for our children, healthcare, longevity, really equal rights and the like, or will it create this dystopia, this useless class that Harari spoke about, where and where our data is definitely no longer our own, where we live in a world where China is at the moment with their social scoring system and the like. So it's really that. So I think maybe in conclusion is, let's, when we speak about this technology, also keep in mind the lens of continents like Africa, other developing countries. Let's try and put ourselves in the shoes of those, most people on earth, most whom we will never met, who are so poor that they can't just get their attitude right, learn a digital course, pick themselves up. They will forever, generationally be in poverty. They will die of sicknesses that they don't have to die of. So just a rallying call, and I hope it resonates with everyone here. But I think, Patrick, that's it for now. We're still a few minutes left, but love to hear thoughts of some of the others on here. And I'm going to try and stop sharing my screen if I can get rid of this thing on it at the moment. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Patrick, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Can you see me?
I can see you here in the corner. Let me just try and, I don't know.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah, but anyway, that's fine. I can see a bit of you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Yeah, one question I have, right? Do you think that AI, right? I know it's going to be a very high level generic question. Do you think that AI is going to improve, reduce poverty or increase poverty?
It can go both ways. If we, in my opinion, if we use it right, if we upskill people right, I think it will reduce, most likely will reduce it. To what extent is an interesting question. We can throw into the pot here the whole universal basic income conversation as well. But I think given that more and more people will not be able to upskill themselves, will not be, if we think of truck drivers being replaced by autonomous vehicles now, it's still somewhat of a future view, although we already see some of that happening. I think it will most likely increase poverty rather than reduce it, unfortunately, although I still think we have time to steer the ship. But what we will do as humanity to do it right, I have my doubts about. And then maybe that's a pessimistic view that needs conversation. I don't know. What do you think, Patrick? What's your view?
I have my opinion, but I see two hands raised by Connor and in another colleague. Sorry, I don't know how to call him. But please just unmute yourself and ask the question. Connor or
yeah, I'm happy to go or to leave the floor for the other participant if they would like to start.
So go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Johan, so thank you so much for that talk. And to a certain extent, at least with me, you are preaching to the choir about the importance of these issues. But I wanted to ask, because the story of the panelist who said that people must just take a smartphone and upskill themselves was something that I've encountered quite a lot within the AI field. And I was wondering, in that sense, do you think it's more an intangibility issue or more so a generalization issue? So do you think that these kinds of perspectives that people are not taking into account are not being done so because they don't really have an experience of these kinds of perspectives or issues? Or do you think that it's more generalization, that they just think everyone has a smartphone and that's just how it goes?
My view, I think it's very human nature to think the whole world is like the life I live. And unless you have real exposure to other people, it's easy to think. I mean, it's like that, what's that story of Marie Antoinette in the French Revolution, when they said to her, the people begging for bread, and she said, give them cake. We address these things from our own perspective, which is very natural. But it's our responsibility to expand our world away from the class we live in, or the family we live in, or the standard of living we have. If we want to have opinions about how others should live, or how this technology should impact them, I think we should at least have some exposure. On that note, and this is typically of being on holiday, my laptop's about to die and I don't know where my charger is. So Patrick, I'm going to ask you for 1 minute and I'll be back, but maybe while I'm gone, Connor, you can maybe give your opinion or answer on your own question, or others can, and I see there's a number of hands up, but I'll be back shortly. Let me get my charger.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Johan.
So we'll wait 1 minute. Kanshukan, I think that's your first name, or is that, sorry about that?
Yeah, that's my first name.
Okay. I wasn't sure. So maybe you can go next then, and then Natasha can go next. Just
Sure. So I think Johan hit the nail on the spot, on the part when he was talking about his child and education, and how, our education is one size fits all. And there's this phrase I used about 2 years ago, which probably existed before I used it. I call it precision education, where education is focused on the individual that's studying, rather than on a common syllabus for everyone. And AI has the potential to do that. And we see this in Nigeria, where there is, in some aspects, precision education happening, where, if you could be teaching, it happens at a subject level. So you could be teaching a subject, but then what is taught to an individual is kind of modified to the individuals themselves, rather than giving them the general subject matter. So if I'm good at, for example, if I'm studying mathematics at school and I'm very good at geometry, I could bypass geometry quite quickly and get to another part which I will struggle. Let's say I struggle more with, whereas somebody else who struggles with geometry would spend more time on geometry. And I think that's where we will head to, but we've got to head to that in a massive scale, not at a subject level, but at a whole year level almost, and at a university as well, because but I think we are learning to do that.
Yeah.
Just a comment. And also, Patrick, I guess if I could take this chance, no, I think somebody asked, are we going to get more poor or more richer?
That
Or
was
are we
me.
going to be more
That was-
equitable over
yeah.
time? Well, I think what we saw during other industrial revolutions was, in the short term, a lot of people couldn't adapt because they didn't have the skills to adapt to the new way of being. But on the long term, the children were taught the jobs of the future, or the jobs that were going to come out in the future. And so textile workers couldn't adapt quite quickly, I guess. But then there were people who just didn't become textile workers, during the Industrial Revolution, for example. And they adapted to the new way of being train conductors, I don't know, things like that. So I think we will see that in the short term, we'll have some people who wouldn't be able to adapt because they don't have the resources and they don't have the skills, etc., given to them upfront. There'll be other people who will adapt, and there'll be young people who will be trained for the job of the future. Having said that, there is a risk that whereas in previous years, previous revolutions, it was always going to different human skills. Now we are going into using machines to do machine skills, machine thinking. And when machines think, that does take away the human aspect a little bit. But I think there'll be new job opportunities arising in the future. And of course, there's always a UBI as well. Thanks.
Thanks. You're back.
I'm on charge now and I'm back. I didn't miss much. Thanks for that, Kanshu.
Natasha,
I see Natasha's hand.
had a question.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to say I really appreciate your empowering and very encouraging perspective on Africa, especially rural Africa. I wanted to just comment on the statement or questions that you posed earlier at the beginning of this webinar, where you were asking why the AI would necessarily cut out the word dusty in the title. And part of the work that I've been doing over the past couple of years, from the perspective of being a young, proud African Black woman, is just from the branding perspective. I think Africa has been seen in a light that has been very, very demonized, as well as very, very disempowering. So words like dusty, I think, have a certain implication and connotation. And when you use the word, for example, rural, that is already implied, if you know what I'm trying to say. So I really do appreciate that the AI is kind of gaining some sort of sensitivity towards, you know, just what's the word, identity, African identity. But other than that, I really wanted to just say that I appreciate some of the comments that you made, Johan, especially just showing us the size of Africa. I think that's one of the images that we don't usually see. And back to just African identity, creating a world map where Africa is so small, kind of would really feel deflating. So for you to just highlight that is very, very empowering and really showcases the talent pool that is in Africa, you know, not just from a size perspective, but I think that also implies that, you know, we've got big minds here as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Good.
Lawrence.
Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I've been in and out what hour it is. Earlier, at this presentation, you spoke about conversational AI and how huge it's going to have an impact in Africa. I think I share the same views with you as well. But what I think I'm blinded is how the data sets, the language data sets, will be put together, considering the amount of languages. Take my home country, Nigeria, for example, there are over 200 languages. So I'm kind of blind on what efforts are being made around there in respect to getting the data set to get right to the rural areas that actually need help more than the developed areas.
Lawrence, some of it was a little bit unclear. Yeah, but I think I got the gist of it.
No, yeah.
Okay. Look, so there are some people doing amazing work in Africa in that field, because like you said, there's those foundational data sets on the language to make conversational AI relevant to more Africans. There's, like in South Africa, there's a professor here at University of Pretoria doing, I think they call themselves Mashakane, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me now. It's an organization they started, and I don't know if Kanshuk, you might know more, I'm not sure, but where they are looking at multiple African languages. The problem is these data sets don't exist, they have to create it, and that's a lot of work, but you have to start somewhere. Kanshuk, have you, or at Stellenbosch, do you know about any of these kind of efforts at all?
So there are different groups of people at different universities doing similar things. So there is some work in Pretoria. I mean, I don't know their name, the group's name. There's quite a big group with Phoebe Devitt at Northwest University. She used to be at Stellenbosch. She's got a postdoc at Stellenbosch. There is a person with Heather, I forgot her last name now. She's in linguistics department. And so we've had conversations about looking at, you know, especially AI and languages at early childhood development. So it's a little bit different from what you're asking. There is one of the members of the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking, where I work, looking at you know, automatic translation of the African language or of languages in Africa. I don't know which language he's working on at the moment. It might be Afrikaans, but I think it's actually closer. So, but he's not, you know, but many people are doing different works on different languages. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Yeah.
Thank you, and I see, thank you, Kanshuk. Connor put in the chat here the Mashikane website, and it's really, Lawrence and everyone, have a look at the work they're doing. And there are numerous organizations, although I think Mashikane is maybe one of the leading organizations working in this field. They need more funding, they need more volunteers, and Africans will have to do this work, because we won't get African language data sets, obviously, from Europe and elsewhere.
I think we're running slowly out of time, but frankly, it it's a fantastic topic, right? It's 1 hour is too short, but the first few slides were kind of eye openers in terms of size and potential of Africa, right? By the way, and there was great discussion. I would wish we could follow up on all this, right, in one way or the other. I would be happy to contribute at some point, right? And we can also use the platform, right, to do more, to share experience, to do some training, or to do some research, whatever needed, right? That's would be happy to do so to help. Don't know, Jorge or Miguel, if you have a comment to make.
I think thank you very much, Johan, for the presentation, and I think it was a fantastic conversation. And I think that there is so much potential for this kind of technologies in a place like Africa. It was really, as Patrick mentioned, eye-opener. The size and how big, and maybe in areas like agriculture or health or public infrastructure, I'm sure that AI will contribute a lot in places like Africa.
Yeah, in fact, this is exactly what I wanted to tell Johan. When Johan, you said AI is maybe contributing to increase poverty, I'm an optimist. I believe that it can reduce poverty, because if you use AI, for example, to optimize the access to food, right, to reduce how you call it, animal poaching and things like that, right? You contribute to the human wellness, and contribute to preserve nature and so on and so forth. So I believe I'm an optimist, so I believe that it can reduce poverty on the long term, but we'll see.
I hope it will, and it definitely can. We must just steer it right. You are right, and we have to be hopeful, because this is a gift in the way that we've been given, as I said earlier. So let's just do it right as a collective.
Yep. And
Jorge, any comments from you?
You wanted to say something, but no.
That's fine. I just quickly from my side wanted to say firstly to all the guests, and many of them I know, and lovely people doing great work, but also for this wonderful opportunity, and let's do more together in the future. Patrick, thank you so much.
You're welcome, and enjoy your time in Mauritius. Thanks so much.
You.
Thanks everybody for attending, taking the time.
Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, Johan. All right. Thank you, Patrick. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.